What gospel was the passage taken from that Father Jim just proclaimed tonight? Did you listen? Whose gospel was that passage from? Luke, you do listen. I am shocked. But in a positive way. Luke is one of two gospel writers that actually mention the birth of Jesus at all. So I will do some testing as I preach with you. How many gospels do we have in the Bible? 4, that's right. You know by now Luke is one of them, right? So we only have to think of 3 other gospel writers. So we have Luke, who else? Matthew, good. Mark, and John. Perfect. Gosh, you are smart Catholics. Now, people tell me that most Protestants are smarter when it comes to Bible, but you just proved them wrong. You know the 4 gospel writers. As a matter of fact, there were many other gospel writers that did not make it to the gospel. These 4 did. I guess there was some censorship going on in the 4th century, and these 4 made the cut. But only 2 of them, which is 50% only, right, speak of the birth of Jesus. Luke, and who else? Matthew. Luke and Matthew are the only 2 writers in our Bible that we have that mention Bethlehem, that mention how and when and why Jesus was born. Mark knows nothing about the birth of Jesus. The gospel story of Mark starts with John the Baptist preaching and baptizing Jesus in Jordan River. Now, the gospel of John is totally out of this world. In John, it starts in the beginning. You remember the prologue of John? In the beginning there was Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Again, nothing like baby Jesus. Only Luke and only Matthew bother to speak about what we celebrate every year on December 25th. Another lesson, perhaps you know it by now, but you do realize Jesus was not born in December, right? It could not happen in December. In Palestine, this is not the season when the sheep are eating the grass on the hills and when people are celebrating. Most probably it was somewhere in what we would call springtime, but we don't know for sure. Why do we celebrate Christmas on December 25th? It was already a holiday in the Roman Empire for centuries before Christianity became the official religion of the empire. It was the holiday of the birthday of God, Son, S-U-N, not S-O-N, S-U-N. And so in 312, when the Roman Empire legalized Christianity, they were really smart. They said, why should we invent another holiday? Why should we create Columbus Day or President's Day, right, that nobody knows what it's all about? Let's have the birth of Jesus on a holiday that is already existing, that everybody is celebrating already and drinking anyway. So let's have Christmas on December 25th. So this is the background story of why and how we came to celebrate Christmas on this particular day in our calendar. Now, going back to 4 gospel writers, we live in a culture that many worldviews compete with each other, especially after this crazy election cycle. We all have experienced a lot of conflict and competition and competing of two opposing worldviews. Now, me being European, I think that having only two parties somewhat limits our choices, but that is not the subject of my sermon. We have become used to having to choose one or the other. We have become used to having to declare ourselves, do I think this is right and this is wrong? Or do I believe that your way of making pancakes is wrong and his way of making pancakes is the only way to make them and eat them every morning? We have been brainwashed to think and believe that there is only one way of knowing the truth and every other way must be wrong. Now, if you apply this postmodern way of thinking to our Bible, you would end up very much confused, because the gospel stories do not line up with each other. Even only two of them, Luke and Matthew, who speak about nativity, do not line up with each other. If you put them next to each other, Luke and Matthew, you would have to say one is lying, the other one is not. If you apply this postmodern way of thinking, this has to be right, so this has to be wrong, you would say half of the gospel stories have to be wrong because they contradict the other gospel stories. When you come to take your selfie with Jesus, you will see those three wise men, and to make things interesting, wise men appear only in one gospel, Matthew. Luke doesn't mention them at all. Matthew needs them to make a point. Is Matthew wrong inventing the wise men? Or is Luke trying to hide something by skipping the wise men at all? You see, all the way until late 20th century, people were comfortable with saying this can be truth and that can be truth as well. All the way until very recently, we were just fine when two different stories did not line up 100% all the time. We were comfortable with ambiguity. We were fine when someone told us there is a new way of making a pancake. You should try it. But today, we feel that we have to make choices. We feel that we have to decide who is wrong and who is right. If you apply that razor of 0-1 worldview, half of the Bible will have to be thrown away to the trash can. Today, on this very holy and important and older than Jesus holiday, I invite you to look at the gospel stories, to look at the story of that baby Jesus as a great example of bringing peace to a life full of ambiguities, to a life that accepts richness in diversity, to a life that says there is more than one way to be right. There is more than one way to be a believer. There is more than one way to be a lover. There is more than one way to be a patriot. There is more than one way to be Catholic. There is more than one way to make those damn pancakes. There is more than one way to be a good human person. I will date myself when I will quote the mamas and the papas. Make your own kind of music. Remember that song? Good old 60s and 70s. The Gospels are all about that. They don't care. Luke doesn't care that Matthew will contradict him. John is absolutely not concerned at all with Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They all write their own unique story of Jesus the Christ. They are writing their own kind of music. And the Christians for 20 centuries have been fine with that. We have said it's okay to have diversity in our Bible. It's perfectly right to have different worldviews in our church. Today, in the 21st century, we have to rediscover the peace of ambiguity, the peace of living next to someone who is writing his or her own kind of gospel story that is different from yours. We have to learn to once again accept different writers, different musicians, different lovers, different patriots, different Christians. Perhaps I will not ask our choir to sing your own kind of music with me tonight, but I will ask all of you, as you go home, as you start this new 2017 year, make your own kind of gospel. Write your own story. Be proud of your own way of making those pancakes. Embrace richness and diversity in your life. Embrace diversity in your family, in your church, in your country. Because if everyone spoke and looked and ate like you, where would I fit? With my thick Polish accent? With my love of Polish vodka? And my Polish way of doing pancakes. Make your own kind of music. Make your own gospel today and for the rest of your life. Amen.